woke up clawing madly at the air. Sweat soaked my clothes, and a half-finished scream died on my lips. I lay still for a moment, letting my heart rate settle. My cot groaned as I sat up, and rubbed the pale crescents left by my fingernails from my palms. I'd had the dream again. The last time I had it was back in high school. I ran fingers through my disheveled hair and wondered what dredged up this unpleasant memory. I took some deep breaths to calm down before checking my watch. I was late. I rushed through my morning routine in my small tent. Breakfast was nearly over, and while I didn't mind foregoing what the cook assured me were once eggs, there was no way I was missing the most exciting thing the expedition had done since we'd traveled to the valley and hacked a trail through the sprawling thicket of acacia trees 2 months ago. We were going to be opening the tomb. Hopping through my tent's flapping door, boots still unlaced, I saw the line of archaeologists filing out of the dining tent, the opposite side of camp. I cinched the last knot of my boots and double-timed it across the sand and loose rock, hoping I hadn't forgotten anything important in my haste. My green field notebook, started in Cairo, bounced reassuringly inside my cargo pocket. It had documented our expedition from the trek through the desert, across the rocky valleys of western Egypt to the discovery of the tomb, and there was no way I would be forgetting it now. Rushing past the dining tent, I saw Jorge, bringing up the tail end of the crowd. "Hey, Derrick, what's the big rush, big guy?" he asked, before stuffing a powdered donut into his mouth. "I told Felix not to wait up on you." "Why didn't you wake me up when you walked past my tent this morning?" I said, ignoring his question. "Hey, don't be sore at me," he said, holding up his hands in mock defense. "You was making so much racket in there, I didn't want to know what it was about." "So, you heard that, huh?" "Half the camp heard you," he said, gesturing as he spoke the way New Yorkers do. Great. I rolled my eyes. Looking through the throng of people meandering towards the tomb entrance, I caught a glimpse of something red. Decided to cut the conversation short. "Look, man, I'll catch up with you later. Maybe we can get out the cards tonight." "Yeah, okay. Just remember you still down 3 hands." Jorge shouted after me as I disappeared into the crowd. I sped along, weaving around some of the slower members of the expedition, until I saw the familiar head of red hair bobbing as she walked. "Sam!" I shouted, hurrying past a few disapproving glances. She turned and flashed me her too big smile. Sam was the first member of the expedition I met back in Cairo. I hadn't expected the girl with auburn hair, wearing an evening dress, to have anything more than a casual interest in archaeology. That night at the bar, as our conversation became more nuanced, and I noticed the rough tips of her fingernails and the small calluses on her palms, I began to suspect I might be dealing with someone a little bit more serious. "Derrick, where on earth have you been? I saved you some breakfast." She handed me one of the twin packs of donuts. "No dehydrated eggs?" I asked, with a crooked smile. "No, not this morning. It's a real shame, isn't it? But if you like, I can bring you some more donuts on the house." "Nah," I said, agonizing over an imaginary menu. "How about some biscuits and gravy?" "That's disgusting," she grimaced. "Our biscuits and gravy are different than yours." "I still can't imagine them being any good." Sam rolled her eyes. "Anyway, this is the day we've been waiting for all summer." She hardly needed to remind me. Ever since the team uncovered the first step cut into the valley floor, we wondered what waited for us at the bottom. I never experienced anything more suspenseful than wondering what rested just beneath the next shovelful of sand. That is, until the day I was working with Sam at the bottom of the narrow stairway, and she uncovered the top of a stone slab marked with clay seals. "The seal of the Royal Necropolis Gods," she muttered in awe. We thought we'd have our first look inside the same day, but the expedition organizers insisted one of them be present to supervise the opening of the tomb. The next days passed at an amazingly slow pace while we waited. "Did what's-his-name finally show up?" I asked, between bites of the donut. Sam sighed. "It's His name's James, and yes, he arrived on site this morning. He gave a short, speech before we left the dining tent. What kind of speech? Oh, it was all rot, really. Remind us not to disturb artifacts in the context. Leaving everything untouched until photographed. Oh, and, something about archaeology needing dedicated scholars and not adventure seekers. Yeah, he sounds pleasant. Show some respect, Derrick. He might not be all fun and games, but he is something of an authority in the Egyptological Society. Also, you've met him before. When? During orientation in Cairo, you numpty. Don't you remember? It was the posh-looking one who gave the introduction, and well, I suppose that's about it, really. Ah, how could I forget? I grinned, smacking my forehead. Sam didn't look amused, but in all honesty, I struggled to put a name together with a face. We'd only been in the field for 9 weeks, but Cairo felt like a lifetime ago. Professor Ossendorf, the man who gave the majority of the presentation, had been hard to forget, with his portly stature, numerous guffaws, and habit of making jokes. Unfunny as they were, they still occupied more of my memory than the quiet man, leaning against the wall in his tailored suit. Our conversation abruptly ended, as the narrow confines of the staircase brought us shoulder to shoulder with the other archaeologists. Air danced with mites of sand, carried by the breeze over the top of the plywood retaining wall, on either side of us. We'd constructed them to keep sand from filling the trench we'd spent so much time excavating, and as the crowd lumbered near the bottom of the pit, I caught a glimpse of a vaguely familiar man I took to be James, along with a couple other men I didn't recognize, snapping pictures of him beside the slightly ajar stone slab. It hadn't been that way when I walked through the dig site with Sam the evening before, and I distinctly remember the clay seals, baked solid by millennia in the desert, being affixed to the edges, but now they're absent, and a tantalizing ribbon of darkness peeked at us from around the edge of the slab. Cool, pungent odor wafted through this opening, filling our noses with the smell, similar to tree resins mixed with the interior of a cave. James spoke in a whisper to the men with the cameras, too far away for me to hear anything distinct, before they turned to leave. As they squeezed their way through the crowd, he turned to face us. He wore clothes that didn't bear even the slightest trace of dust, along with a smug look on his face. Couldn't decide how old he was. His features looked like those of someone young, but his graying hair told a different story. I didn't have time to dwell on any of this before he began a speech similar to the one Sam summarized on our walk to the site. "Remember," he said, assuming the tone of a lecturer, "this is the initial examination of the tomb. Any artifacts can be catalogued and prepared for transport after the layout is known. To reiterate, do not touch, and for God's sake, do not move anything. Now, let's get this door all the way open, shall we?" He gestured to a few of the men closest to him, but offered no help as they shoved the massive stone aside. Somewhere behind me a camera flashed, as stone ground against stone. The narrow crack grew into a rectangular passageway. Cold air drifted past us, and the pungent smell was almost overpowering. Sunlight revealed little of the interior past the thick curtain of cobwebs dangling from the ceiling. James gestured for us to follow him as he crept into the tomb. One by one, our team slipped into darkness behind him. Sam and I exchanged looks of excitement as we inched closer to the tomb entrance. Her too big smile was contagious. I don't think I've ever been as excited as I was taking that first step into the inky blackness of the tomb, Sam. Our headlamps trembled with excitement as we looked at our surroundings. Most of the cobwebs were brushed away from the center of the passageway, giving us a fairly unobstructed view of our surroundings. We passed through a small antechamber, about the size of a large closet, before following our team up a sloping passageway. It was roughly the same width as the staircase leading to the tomb, the only exception being the buttresses interrupting the passage at regular intervals. Each time we passed through one of these, Sam and I had to squeeze closer together. I didn't mind. Beneath the thick dust covering the walls, our headlamps revealed hints of hieroglyphs, waiting all these centuries to tell their secrets. The next chamber was about 20 feet by 20 feet, and already crowded by the people ahead of us. Murmurs of amazement echoed as Sam and I drifted apart in the sparsely furnished room. Like the antechamber and corridor leading up to it, the stonemason's skill was on full display. 2 more stone slabs stood, concealing chambers to the eastern and western sides of the chamber. I was surprised the only artifacts awaiting us were the clay lamps sitting in the corners, but mosaics glimmering through the dusty cobwebs more than made up for this. I knew better than to wipe away the dust with my bare hands, but the temptation was never stronger, as hues of blues and golds glimmered in the beam of my headlamp. As I stood in front of one of the more sparsely covered mosaics, trying to make out whether I was looking at a field of wheat or maybe a reed boat, I heard Sam calling me. I looked at the opposite side of the chamber and saw her, dust smudged over the freckled bridge of her nose, waving for me to join her. I weaved my way around the other archaeologists milling around, passing James, lost in thought, staring at one of the mosaics. My curiosity about what Sam wanted turned to concern when I noticed the hole in the wall behind her. "Look what I found," Sam said, beaming as she gestured to the face-sized hole. It was eye level for me, but a few inches higher than her head. My first thought was concern. The rest of the tomb had been so carefully crafted, this seemed out of place. Should I get Felix or James? If there's some kind of structural damage to the tomb, we need to reinforce the wall. Sam waved her hand dismissively. "It's not structural damage, it's a surdab. It was built into the tomb." "Why?" Sam smirked, and I thought she was going to start with one of her comparisons between archaeology and Egyptology. I was relieved when she just answered my question. "It's a sort of way that ancient Egyptians believed a person's spirit, or the life force, the cause they called it, could travel to and from the statue inside. Can you give me a lift? I want to have a look inside, and I'm not quite as tall as you are, am I?" I looked at James. He was still transfixed by whatever he was looking at. "All right, let's make this quick. I don't want Mr. Ministry of Antiquities over there to see us." Sam stood in front of the surdab, and I lifted her up by her waist. She put her face nearly inside the hole, and I looked around at the other archaeologists milling around, surprised none of them had noticed what we were up to. "Can you see anything?" "Oh, yes, wonderful things." Her voice came out as a muffled echo. "All right, Mr. Carter, can we revisit this later?" With a grunt, I set Sam down. She wiped dust from her hands and clothes. "There's definitely a car statue inside, but it's quite dirty. Nothing a good hoovering out won't fix, though." After setting Sam back on the floor, I looked inside the statue. Like everything else, it was covered in dusty cobwebs, and its appearance was obscured. It looked vaguely humanoid, but the proportions felt off somehow. Eye sockets glimmered as I caught the light from my headlamp. Turning my gaze from the surdab, I realized it was a place where the statue could keep watch over the entrance. I couldn't help but wonder when the last time it witnessed anyone step inside the tomb. We spent most of that day cleaning, carefully brushing cobwebs and dust curtains from the ceiling and walls. Each brushstroke revealed more of the breathtaking mosaics and columns of hieroglyphs. The builder's craftsmanship was on full display. Every joint where stones met was perfect. Walls were more smooth and level than some I'd seen in modern buildings. This made it all the more noticeable when I encountered the first of the chisel marks, obscuring a small section of hieroglyphs. I didn't think much of it at first. Mistakes are bound to happen on a project this size. Maybe a stonemason's chisel slipped, or someone accidentally hit the wall while carrying something inside. This came into question as we uncovered several more similarly damaged glyphs. Some were effaced more methodically, a rectangular chasm blotting out the space. I wondered if these specific words were stricken out intentionally, and if so, for what purpose? Normally I would have just asked Sam, but she was busy working in a different group, photographing hieroglyphs and mosaics. I wanted to join her, but a combination of my absence from the morning meeting and James discovering my lack of experience in Egyptian archaeology led to me being assigned the lesser task of sweeping while real archaeologists worked. I still managed to steal glances at both Sam and the art covering the walls through the day. I also helped Jorge make a three-dimensional model of the inside of the tomb with his ROV. Like me, Jorge wasn't an Egyptologist. Rather, he was a robotics student, field testing a concept. I couldn't help but smiling at the other members of the team as they complained about not being able to open the next chambers until Jorge's contraption finished scanning the chapel. "It's not fair we have to wait while he plays around with his robot," someone whined. Jorge ignored them as the 3-foot-long, cigar-shaped ROV trucked along on its rubber caterpillars, slowly gathering data. The way Jorge told it, the ROV was originally meant for a project called Scan Pyramids, but ended up getting delayed and eventually disqualified from participating. "Why did they want it?" I asked. "These 3D scans look incredible." "Too heavy," he grinned, slapping his own gut good-naturedly. "They ended up going with something smaller, less capable of image gathering, but light and thin enough to pass through all those smaller nooks and crannies in the Great Pyramids." By the time we completed our scans, there was only enough time left that day to open one of the chambers. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't somewhat disappointed when we opened the chamber to the east, only to reveal no mummy. Sam called this chamber a storeroom, basically a place where the interred could store their earthly possessions for the afterlife. The rest of that afternoon was a barrage of camera flashes as the team carefully tagged artifacts before storing them in rugged pelican cases for their journey to the Egyptological Society for study. Sam was overjoyed when a large wooden case containing several scrolls was uncovered in the back of the chamber, behind a sonnet board and oil lamps, but it was a bittersweet moment of discovery. She wouldn't be able to examine any of their delicate writings, not here in the field. It was unlikely she would see them unrolled firsthand unless she was lucky enough to secure a position at the Egyptian Museum handling ancient documents. Near the end of the day, James left to send a report to the Ministry of Antiquities, giving me a chance to look around the chamber Sam called the chapel. I didn't intend to stay so late when I volunteered to put out the lights, but after pushing the broom around all day while everyone else did the real work, I figured I'd earned the right to look around. I was admittedly a novice with hieroglyphs, but the murals seemed more transparent in their meaning. Although I was missing much of their context, it didn't detract from my satisfaction looking at images of reed boats sharing the Nile with fish, crocodiles, and the small group of soldiers cutting their way through the papyrus with sickle-shaped swords on the riverbanks. Beneath the water's surface was a much different scene. Vague human outlines gazed upward like damned souls, as if preying on those above, floating down the river, unaware of the horrors just beneath them. I shuddered when I noticed the dark outline of a female form, rowing a boat underwater, beckoning to those trapped beneath the waves. I snapped a picture of this before leaving. I turned off the work lights in the chapel before heading to the tomb exit. My headlamp flickered, and its beam bobbed with each footstep down the passageway. Buttressed walls cast long shadows over the columns of text and scenes of Egyptian religious ceremonies. Despite their simplicity, the depictions of mummification unsettled me. I've never considered myself superstitious, but I was alone in a tomb after all, and the images of the lost souls under the river were still fresh in my mind. They dredged up memories of a time I almost drowned, a memory which, until that morning, I thought I'd stopped having nightmares about. Long rays of daylight stretching into the passageway from outside comforted me as I neared the stairway outside. Switching my headlamp off, I tried focusing on what I might do at camp that evening. Grab something to eat, make an entry about my day in my field notebook, maybe email my family from the communications tent. I had to be selective with any pictures I decided to attach. The site's remote location in a secluded valley might have protected it from looters and grave robbers through the centuries. But it also meant communications to the outside world were slow, unreliable, and subject to size limitations. My feelings of relief evaporated when a long, thin shadow obscured the light from outside. It looked humanoid, taking halted steps down the staircase, but it startled me enough I froze at the foot of the sloping passageway. The shadowy figure reached the threshold of the tomb. Before they could take a hesitant step inside, they screamed. I almost responded with a yell of my own before realizing it was only Sam. "What the bloody hell are you doing in here, Derrick?" I sighed in relief, realizing I'd been holding my breath. "I was photographing some of the mosaics," I said. "I must have got sidetracked after volunteering to shut the lights off. Anyway, I was just heading back to camp. Sam held a hand to her chest. Well, you've given me a fright just now. Sorry about that. What are you doing back here so late anyway? I was just at the dining tent and wanted to look over my notes for the day. Sam opened the backpack over her shoulder and rifled around before pulling out an empty hand. But I must have left them behind. Maybe while I was cleaning out the sudab. I was about to go in and find them. She paused for a moment. Would you mind terribly coming along with me? It's just that... That you're afraid to be alone in the dark, scary tomb? I taunted her, as if I hadn't just been terrified myself walking down the passageway. Of course I am. It's creepy in there, you numpty. Yeah, you're telling me. Sam smiled as she tucked a few stray hairs behind her ear. Please, won't you come with me? Only if you share your notes whenever we get back to camp, I said, stepping to the side so we could both walk up to the chapel. That's a deal, she said. With that, we turned and ventured deeper into the tomb. Sorry about calling you numpty, by the way, she said as we walked. Is that supposed to be offensive? Still didn't quite grasp Sam's British slang, and after asking her to explain some of it at camp one night, began to doubt I ever would. Only a little bit, she said, with a small smile. You haven't seen James lately, have you? I haven't seen him since we opened the storeroom, I said. Or at least, not since we cataloged the scrolls. I had no idea what I'd done that day, but I seemed to have made something of an enemy out of our project officer. He seemed incapable of speaking in anything but criticisms, going as far as to criticize the way I swept the floor at one point. All that said, I'd developed a habit of keeping an eye out for him. He must still be in his tent. He's really taken ownership of this project since we opened the storeroom, Sam said, using finger quotes, mocking James's corporate jargon. Our jokes died as we crossed the threshold into the dark chapel. Our headlamps illuminated narrow swaths of the chamber as we picked our path around the pelican cases, extension cords, and work lights. I wanted to switch one of them on to help us see better, but Sam insisted our headlamps were good enough. I dropped the subject almost immediately and followed her to the serdab. I scanned the floor along the way, looking around pieces of equipment and inside coils of cables, but found nothing. You didn't put it in a pelican case by mistake, did you? No, I wouldn't have done that, she said, shining her light toward the serdab. She walked over to the hole in the wall, stood up on her tiptoes. Sam sighed. Perhaps frustrated, her eyes came just short of the opening, before plunging her hand inside. Her face was pensive as she searched blindly in the hole. I picked a path around the equipment cluttering the room. I was tall enough to just look inside and save her some of the trouble. I was almost there when Sam's face lit up. Oh, I found it, she said, her too big smile spreading across her face as she thrust her hand deeper into the hole. I must have said... Sam's screams echoed off the stone walls. She jerked her hand from the serdab, slinging a mass of writhing legs through the air. It landed with a meaty smack somewhere out of sight. Sam clutched a bleeding hand to her chest and leaned against the wall. What the hell is that thing? I shouted. My headlamp whipped across the room as I frantically searched. Somewhere in the darkness, it skittered across the stone floor. Sam screamed again. I followed her headlamp's beam to the biggest scorpion I'd ever seen. It writhed on its back, mere feet from where we stood, trying to flip itself upright. I needed a weapon, saw nothing within reach. Contorting its back and thick tail in a sickening way, it plopped back onto its feet. I cast all caution to the wind and lunged at it. The legs writhed and the stinger jabbed at my leather boot. It wriggled as I ground under my heel. There was a wet crunch as its stinger, legs, and snapping pinchers bolted out straight before going limp. I turned to see Sam, leaned against the wall, a listless expression on her face. Sam! I rushed to her side as her eyelids closed and she slid to the floor under the serdab. She was unconscious but still breathing, and I needed to get her back to camp. I looked up at the dark hole in the wall just above us. I had no idea what else was hiding inside. Didn't want to find out. Sam flopped lifelessly in my arms as I heaved her over my shoulder. I gave the tomb a parting glance to satisfy myself nothing else was waiting inside. My headlamp didn't reveal the bioluminescent glow of any more scorpions, but instead the Ka statue's eyes, glowing a faint red. I shuddered and hurried down the passageway, trying not to bump or hit Sam into any of the buttressed walls as I struggled to rationalize what I'd just seen. Her wounded hand dangled in front of my face, already swollen from the venom. Veins like purple spiderwebs radiated from the hole ripped by the stinger, dripping blood on both me and the tomb floor.